Hello, and welcome back to a Chakras and Cuss Words podcast. My name is Catherine, and I'm your host. And today we are going to dive deep into the new moon in Pisces energy that is occurring on February 27th at 2025. And it is at 7:45 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I will be using the chart from Cafe Astrology app, which is a website that you could go ahead and check out for all of your astrology charts. So I was looking at their chart and I was like, okay, there is definitely a lot of area of intrigue and also a lot of energy that is really hitting this element of the Pisces. And it's like full throttle when we look at it. Like there is a lot of connections there. Not only do we have the sun, the moon, and the energy surrounding Pisces, but we also have the energy of the other planets all kind of like combined in this center. And it feels very like different and it feels very intriguing. And one of the things is I haven't been posting about new moons. I've been kind of like ignoring the new moons just because of my recording schedule, and it's kind of hard for me to hit topics and then also hit like the new moons. And I've been concentrating a little bit more on the full moons. But when I look at the energy of the Pisces and I look at the energy of this new moon and the current situations that we have occurring, so not only do we have the energy of the moon in Pisces, but we also have the energy of Mercury in Pisces and also Neptune in Pisces, Saturn in Pisces. It just feels like a lot. It feels like a big lot. And it also feels like very sensitive in some formats, but it also feels like very, like I was saying, like alluring, where you're like, oh my gosh, I have to reflect on this moon. I have to concentrate. I have to set intentions around this mood. And many of us are wondering like, why are we feeling this high intensity of our spiritual presence, wanting us to connect to this moon? Well, the reason why, in all honesty, is because this moon is kind of like the gateway. Some might say, as a Pisces, the gateway drug. But in all honesty, the gateway or the portal, the entryway, before we really reflect on our shadow. And that means we're hitting eclipse season. And while this moon is centered around some eclipses because it is the entryway, but it's not actually being affected by a full eclipse, we do have a little bit of that retrograde energy coming through. But in all honesty, the fact that we have so much energy centered around the Pisces is kind of like hard to ignore. It's like, okay, we got to reflect on it. We got to talk about it. We got to do something about it. So not only are we going to have the area of the sun in Pisces, the moon in Pisces, and Saturn in Pisces, Neptune in Pisces, but we also have the North Node in Pisces. And this was a shift that occurred earlier within this year. And now we kind of like really see that presence. So let's start to talk about this moon, and let's start to talk about some areas of intentions that we could bring on with this energy. So this moon in Pisces is occurring in 9 degrees. And when I tell you this moon is like a portal of deep spiritual renewal and also like deep energy of your spiritual alchemy and also your intuition and your emotional healing, it is centered in 9 degrees. We're in the year of 9. And the Pisces I've always seen as like a spiritual creature, the energy of emotional well-being and also emotional sovereignty. Many of you guys know I see the Pisces as like the Jesus sign. And when I think of Jesus, I think of somebody who is not just a messenger, but also somebody who is like highly connected to the energy of the cosmos and also the universe and the gods. Not getting into the whole debacle of like if Jesus is the Son of God, but just he is very well connected in the energy of the universal cosmos. So that's something that we have to talk about in energies of moving forward and accepting our presence, and where it is that we feel aligned in certain stances and also like certain areas of wisdom. So me personally, like if you were to ask me if I thought Jesus was the Son of God, I'd be like, I don't really know. And that's just me being honest. I definitely think he was influential, and I definitely think that he has some area of substance that speaks very louder than what others would like to hear and that what others would like to interpret. But I also do believe that a lot of people have that energy of being like prophecies, and also being the energy of seeking certain knowledge that doesn't come very much centered like in the forefront. It's not like every day somebody's like, oh, you really speak the words of wisdom, and you really speak the words of like universe and the wisdom of God or gods, right? But I do think that there are certain people that kind of stand out in the historical, I guess you could say, transcript of what this lifetime has provided us, or lifetimes of the past. So when we look at this new moon in Pisces, we have to really look at the energy of the emotional, and not just the emotional, but the spiritual area of transformation. So this energy is occurring right before we hit shadow season. And shadow season is really reflective of eclipse season. So many people, and I mean people like astrologers, alchemists, witches, or people who are centered around nature and the energy of like the cosmic forces, don't really promote creating huge intentions during the shadow state, just because eclipses are seen as a very almost like shadowy, dark, and chaotic, and a lot of the intentions don't really come forward until like another, 2 decades or something like that. But in all honesty, I do think that eclipses do have a lot of energy of reflection, and also they do have a lot of energy of movement. So even though we aren't entering our eclipse season by having our first eclipse, we are entering in this is the last new moon before we hit our eclipse season. So this is definitely an energy of new beginnings, and also making an area of powerful time to release certain past and, I guess you would say, centered intentions that you feel like have not been coming forward or have not been centered around the area of movement. And what's interesting is like the Pisces is in Saturn, and Saturn in Pisces to me feels like very constrictive. So I feel like a lot of us have been almost like scared to express certain of our, I guess you say, our dreams, our energies of consciousness, our energies of our hidden messages, where this time it feels like we need to do it now before that energy releases. And the energy of like the mystic and the energy of the modern mystic, and that's really what I try to focus on here, is the modern mystic, because I feel like sometimes with the everyday it's so hard to be mystical, but that divine presence is in us so subconsciously, and for some reasons we just kind of like don't see it or don't feel it, or we feel like misaligned with it. But this is honestly the time that we have that awareness, and some might see it as like a psychic awareness, and some might also see it as a conscious awareness. But that energy of awareness will feel a little bit more heightened. And for those who already kind of figure that they are a little bit more intuitive than others, they might be feeling like a little bit more centered around their dreams or their hidden messages, or their energy of surrendering and letting go. And one of the things I was really like reflecting on earlier today was like letting go of the energy of forgiveness, where we're like forgiving ourselves. And I really think that is a spiritual presence that so many of us, it's very like difficult to do. Oh, honey, it's so difficult to do. It really is. But in all honesty, it is like the first step to allowing ourselves to move past certain situations and also allowing ourselves to move past certain events and certain memories that are kind of like clogging up our timeline. I don't really know how else to explain it, but it almost feels like, yes, it's clogging up my timeline. It shouldn't be here. I don't want it here. Why is it still here? And why is it clogging up my timeline? Why is it in my memory space? And a lot of it has to do with because we haven't forgave ourselves. And that is such a hard journey, because a lot of times we look at that area of where we've even been like a little bit of abused, I guess you could say neglected, or even hurt. Maybe even there's like the center grief that continues to come up, and we feel almost like ashamed that we accepted it. And then we also feel ashamed that we allowed it to occur to us. And we're like, well, how do I let go of this shame and let go of this grief and let go of this energy? How do I let go? Well, one of the biggest ways to let go is to understand that this was something that happened to you, but this isn't necessarily that is something that made you. So even though this is an area of obstacle and it's something that you overcome, it's something that you have to forgive, because a lot of us hold on to a lot of trauma. Like just recently, I was like really holding on to the trauma of my inner child or my inner younger self, where I was like really reflecting on it. And it's like there's certain people that I could automatically forgive because they were somewhat like on the same mind space and somewhat on the same like frequency as me, and even somewhat on the same age level as me. And then there's some people who I absolutely cannot forgive because they should have been on a higher frequency. They should have been on a higher standard, and they were at a higher energy of maturity in their life, where it's almost like you shouldn't allow things like that to occur, and you shouldn't be the one perpetrating things like that to occur in certain situations, in certain areas of healing. But I have to allow myself to give my younger self that energy of forgiving the self, right? And that's kind of what this sun and moon in Pisces at 9 degrees represents, because we have to remember that the area of 9 is that area of representation that stands out with wisdom and also spiritual growth, and also is centered around the energy of movement. And while we still have Saturn in Pisces, that energy urges us to be centered in our intuition and also to see where we can manifest our dreams and also our state that feels centered around new movement. And we have to remember that with this time, we still have we still have so many planets, so much movement astrologically aligned with Pisces. We also have Neptune, and that feels kind of like it's like tugging at us, and it's saying us to not let the areas of confusion, escapism, and escapism is a little bit hard because we all want to escape, right? We all want to escape out of a reality, out of the area of trauma, out of the area of hurt, out of the area of grief, out of the area of illusions, out of the area of spiritual confusion. And we want to escape into an area that feels very rewarding and also feels very centered around our own creative space. I would say for this new moon, I think it's because I haven't been concentrating on the new moons recently on a podcast spectrum. I've been concentrating them more on a personal spectrum, but not really centered here with you guys. So the area of new moons, you don't have the illumination. So a lot of people might feel a little bit more centered around reflection because you're not creating like massive intentions, but you're kind of creating like reflection. So I would look at water rituals, like taking a ritual bath, working with moon water, especially since it is occurring in the energy of Pisces. Also meditate by water if you do have water, or if you have like an outside water bath, I would use that. Journaling, dream work, definitely journaling and dream work. My dreams have been super intense lately. It's almost like crazy intense. And sometimes I feel like kind of weird when I have such intense dreams, because I'm like, do I reflect on this? Do I just wish it would go away? Like, what do I do? But I feel like there's a part of the subconscious mind that wants you to emphasize on that and to learn more about what it is that you're dreaming. So a dream journal for those who don't remember their dreams for long periods of time, definitely reflect that energy. And then we have the energy of like spiritual practices. So spiritual practices, and this is when we get into the Jesus sign of the Pisces. So spiritual practices look different for everybody. My spiritual practices might not look like yours, and your spiritual practices might not look like mine. And that's totally okay. What I want you to do is find something that's aligned to you. So if that is going and meditating, journaling, even exercising, or even being centered around grounding, listening to water, go ahead and do that. Or tarot, astrology, or maybe getting down into it and doing some witchcraft. I would definitely do it for this new moon. Oh my goodness, honey. I keep saying full moon, but it's a new moon at 9 degrees in Pisces. So sun is in Pisces and moon is in Pisces. Oh, baby girl. Why do I keep saying that? It's just because I've always haven't been recording about about the new moon. So, but when we look at the energy of the Pisces, I love the energy of the water. So the energy of the water is really going to show through as we have it being aligned with the energy of rain, storms. And I feel like that energy is going to kind of like come through. And also I feel like this is a good moon to really like put water around the sacral chakra. And especially if you're centered around fertility, you're going to want to put that around the energy of the umbilical cord, a little bit of water, a little bit of moon water, even though there won't get its full illumination because the moon is actually not illuminated and it's going dark. So I would use, if you are going to use moon water for this moon, I wouldn't necessarily use it around the energy of fertility, but I would use it towards the energy of like cleansing and clearing away certain aspects, because it is a little bit more shallow in the energies of having I guess you could say, a reflective presence, and also having the energy of a shadow. So this energy would be centered around maybe clearing instead of actually intentions. But this is also a new moon to create some intentions around fertility. But I wouldn't necessarily use moon water to do that. I would use more of the energy of the tub, like the presence of like a ritual bath, also energies of creation, the number 3, and also the area of using the rain. If you are in somewhere that's raining, I would use rain water, because when I look at the energy of the Pisces and also the water element, some of the gods that stand out to me is the goddess Tlaloc, which is the god of rain and storms, which is one of the most powerful deities from the Mexican culture. And she has the energy around rain, water, fertility, and she's also associated with the mountains and the caves. So even though we are centered around like the darkness of the shadow of the new moon, we're also centered around the energy of fertility. So let's get into a little energy around numerology. Okay. When I first heard this moon was in 9 degrees, I was like, OMG. The last new moon before we hit eclipse season and all the retrogrades is in 9 degrees. And 9 degrees is the year that we're in. So we are currently in, I believe, the wooden snake at the year of 9. We're in 2026 and that equals 9. So the energy of 9 is a very interesting energy. It's centered around completion, and it's also centered around wisdom, and it has like a little approach of humanity somewhere in there, right? We have a little bit of humanity somewhere in there. It's also about ending and saying goodbye to old chapters and taking on the energy of new right before we hit the energy of 1, which will be next year. Ooh, scary, right? But that's how it is. So this energy is centered around spiritual awareness and also the area of understanding the universal truth and the infinitive energy of closing certain chapters. We do see that reflective place of compassion where I feel like so many of us are kind of like losing compassion, and we're losing that energy of, I don't know if it's faith or hope, but it's almost like we're like, oh, are things going to get better? Things always get better when you allow it to. But if you're centered around that space of being very pessimistic, it's going to continue to feel like that. But if you're centered around the energy of knowing that with each new chapter comes a new place of growth, growth is going to occur. So allowing yourself to have that act that is centered around not just servicing yourself, but also servicing the community and also servicing the energy of movement. When we look at the energies of transformation, the 9 resembles it to the fullest. It's centered around new cycles and also releasing and surrendering. And that's what releasing and surrendering our spiritual presence really stands out with this new moon right before we hit eclipse season. It's centered around saying goodbye to the old situations, saying goodbye to the energy of holding on to old grief, sadness, trauma, or centered around shame, and closing that chapter and surrendering to our new and vibrant spiritual self, living to the most highest expectation that we could possibly live at. It's around that energy that feels drawn to the creative, and it's also centered around the energy of Neptune, which is moving in different areas of illusions and movement that almost feels like a dreamlike presence, but acknowledging that our emotional and also our areas of attachment has to be released before we carry on these burdens, or I guess you could say generational curses, to the next cycle. The number 9 is automatically a Pisces energy, which makes it aligned with the spiritual connection and energy around compassion and innovative situations that many of us sometimes fear. When we are looking at like psychic downloads, many of us do not want like that many psychic downloads. I was just talking to a Pisces the other day, and it was very funny because I was like, oh, I feel like you're a little psychic. And she was like, oh my gosh, I am. Can you tell it to stop? I hate it. And part of me is like, baby girl, that is your gift. But then there's a part of me that I get it. She's living in fear, and she's living in the area of the unknown. So for her, she's like, oh my gosh, I hate it. I want it to stop. Where for some people, we understand to reflect on that energy and acknowledge what it is and acknowledge the differences between anxiety and also actual downloads. So anxiety will love to play its tricks on people who are naturally psychic. or naturally intuitive, however you want to see it. You need to understand the difference. So the difference comes where you are scared of losing certain things, losing certain situations, and you're paranoid. You have to allow yourself to let go of that energy and just seek the wisdom of the truth and the events. But also life in general, when we look at the life path of 9, is centered around a service. And we have to understand that our area of intuition is somewhat of a servant of our own well-being. It is centered around like healing and creative and that energy of prosperity and moving forward. So that's what this moon really represents for the new moon in Pisces right before we hit the eclipse season, and that energy of shadow. And if you are interested in learning about shadow work, definitely check out my podcast because I have so much information on shadow work. But this energy is definitely about being on the new phase and being prepared for the new phase of your journey. So let's get into a brief tarot and reading for the zodiacs. Okay, so I'm just finishing up my shuffle right here. For the zodiacs, we will do a little bit of a reading. The reading that I am centered on is with tarot, and I will use the Light Seers tarot deck, one of my favorite decks. I love the astrology on this deck, and the other deck is a crystal deck. It's interesting because it's called Crystals Tarot, and it is from Mexico. So it is a different type of deck. You probably will not be able to find it here on the US, but if you try, good luck. Let me know in the comments if you found it. I love the illustrations on this deck. It is a little different than your traditional tarot. But let's continue. So for the first zodiacs, I will be reading for the fire signs. If you are a fire sign, that means that you are Aries, Sagittarius, and Leo. The first card is centered around creating new areas around wealth and creating new areas around possibilities and family. I want you to see that where you focus your intentions on is really up to you, but I want you to also be centered around the root chakra and the movement of presence that feels right to you. It feels very communicative, and it also feels very much centered around being aligned in new aspects and also energies around presence of collaboration. There's also an energy that feels like very intrusive when I think about this reading that might make you want to definitely do a full cleansing aura, as we are centered around the new energy of the new moon, and also being centered around getting over certain hurdles and getting over certain obstacles. So definitely do aura cleansing if that's a ritual bath, if that's a full-on aura cleansing, if that is burning certain energy around sage or rosemary or incense. Use that. Clear the energy around you and clear that space. Definitely be focused on new intentions around family, collective, and the area of feeling safe and comfortable. But before you could do that, you have to really work through that energy of hurdles and obstacles that has been holding you back and also allowing you to feel very stuck in that presence. For the energy of the water signs, if you are a water sign, that means you are a Pisces and you are a Cancer and also a Scorpio. Ooh, Scorpios are so mystical. I love them. This is a good time for you. This is like a very, very good time for you. This new moon should be centered on growth, stability, and power. This should be centered around your passions, your energy around what it is that you truly desire in the space that makes you feel aligned in you as a soul, as a spirit, and also you on a area that seems entitled and also seems a little bit selfish. Like when we are talking about being a little bit selfish, that's okay. We like to be shellfish sometimes, you know? So really pick up that energy of your presence, your energy of your soul, your energy of your spirit, and create intentions that feel right toward that spirit. This is a me time for you. Me, and that's okay. Also, really dive into the energy of power, understanding how complex, but also how creative you are. Also, for you, I want to say that you are going to be centered around your divine feminine and also fertility. So, if you are centered around creating new aspects towards movement, you have to first let go of the past and you have to let go of the old chapters. So that means you have to forgive your own self. You have to clear that own self, and you have to clear that energy of creation. You also have to clear that area of shadow. So for the water signs, I want you to dive right into the shadow work. Clear it, movement, and move it forward past you. And then let go of whatever energy has been holding you back. If it's been centered around death, passing, rebirth, or transformation, allow it to embrace that certain circumstances, but also allow it to clear away. For the next signs, we have the earth signs, and that is the Virgo, the Capricorn, and the Taurus. So there's like this energy that feels very like almost wishy-washy, like you're centered around a decision, or maybe centered around the energy of intuition, and you're not really like sure what to be focused on. Since we are having a new moon in Pisces, I want you to be centered on your presence of what it is that you are centered around in your own being. So take this time to really understand you, understand your emotions, understand the turmoil, understand the movement of the compassion, and also the life lessons that might have been holding you back or might have been like weighing you down. Allow yourself that emotional depth to really let go of them. Also allow yourself that energy of resemblance, where you realize that you can conquer a lot of space and you can also conquer a lot of turmoil and obstacles, even when it feels hard. And if you've been doing that, I just want to say, like, my hat goes off to you. I'm so proud of you that you've gone through that and you're still winning, you're still moving, and you're still growing. So allowing yourself to move past the energy that has been trying to let you down, that has been trying to hurt you. Because a lot of us are centered around, if it is like negative energy, or if it's like haters, or if it's like pessimistic people, and we continue to allow ourselves to get up and fight one more day, or we allow ourselves to continue to move one more day. I just want to acknowledge that this energy is here for you to continue to move forward in it. And our next zodiacs are the air signs. For the air signs, you are definitely the air signs. They, I have a special place in my heart for air signs. But the air signs, they are definitely centered around intuition. I feel like there's going to be a lot of psychic downloads for the air signs for this new moon. And that's okay. That's okay. You guys are used to it. So be centered with that aspect, reflect on it, and see how you're going to close out certain chapters. Also close out the grief. Oh, close out the grief. Write it down, burn it, take in new intentions, move forward. Understand that not everybody is made to create, not everybody is made to be so magnetic, and you shouldn't hold yourself like captive because you are a little bit different than everybody else. That's okay, but you are going to have to own it. And you're going to have to live in that presence where you understand that you are centered around the movement of moving forward, whatever that feels like, whatever that embraces like, whatever that energy cycle is tied into. So I definitely do feel like the dreams are going to be high for the air signs. The energy of intuition is going to be high for a lot of the zodiacs. But this is definitely a time to reflect and to move forward. So I want to thank you guys so much for listening. Please comment, like, and subscribe if you have not subscribed before. This is your time to subscribe. I'm really trying to get more subscriptions, subscribe. Trying to increase that follow ladder. And if you would love to give me a rating, that's how you can pay me back on this little new moon reading. Go ahead and give me a rating. What do you think of this podcast? I try to give a lot of options of content: birth charts, meditation, spirituality as a whole, a little bit of conspiracy, because your girl's a little witchy. But let me know what you think, and make sure it's like 5 stars, because why have 3 when the cosmos are so big? Share this with your witchy bestie, and everybody have an amazing day. Bye.